He thought she was just a civilian lost, maybe nosy, so he ordered her off the training grounds and drenched her with the emergency rinse system. What he didn't know, that woman was his new Navy SEAL captain. This isn't just a story of a mistaken identity, it's a lesson in leadership, humility, and what respect really looks like in the SEALs. Before we dive into this incredible story of discipline, error, and redemption, drop a comment, where are you watching from? And if you believe true leadership is earned, not given, hit that subscribe button. These Navy SEAL stories matter. The early morning sun cast golden streaks across the rugged coastline of Naval Outpost Arrowhead in Monterey Bay as Captain Harper Dalton stepped out of her dusty Jeep Wrangler, dressed in jeans, a flannel shirt, and aviators. She looked nothing like the decorated Navy SEAL officer who had earned 5 commendations over her 16-year career. Today was her first day as commanding officer of SEAL Team Echo, a unit known for its iron discipline and fierce loyalty. But instead of marching in under formal protocol, Harper chose a different tactic. Observe first, reveal later. She had one mission this morning: to understand the men she would soon lead. Civilian clothes stripped away the rank. It let her see raw behavior, unfiltered dynamics, and hidden weaknesses. Her boots crunched across the gravel as she moved closer to the combat dive training pool. The shouts of commands echoed in the crisp air. That's when she saw him, Chief Petty Officer Jack Mason, tall, tattooed, with the kind of quiet authority earned through sweat, scars, and survival. He barked instructions as younger SEALs dove into the icy water. Harper lingered in the shadows near the equipment shed, watching unnoticed. Calculating completely unaware, her presence was already raising suspicion. Harper shifted her weight slightly, the crunch of gravel under her boots almost drowned by the slap of water from the nearby training pool. She watched with narrowed eyes as the SEALs executed their underwater navigation drills, a grueling exercise designed to simulate the disorienting chaos of combat diving. The water looked calm from a distance, but beneath the surface, it was a test of composure, control, and raw grit. She spotted him again, Chief Jack Mason standing at the pool's edge like a sentry carved from stone. At 6'3", with a sleeve of inked war stories down one arm and a jawline that might as well have been regulation issued, Mason barked corrections like a drill sergeant born from salt water. But his voice wasn't cruel, it was clipped, precise. The kind of tone that only comes from having lived every failure he was now coaching these younger men to avoid. Harper's focus shifted to a young operator struggling in the pool, Petty Officer Liam Rhodes. According to her briefing, Rhodes had joined SEAL Team Echo just 7 months prior. Raw talent, impressive scores in Bud S, but still green, very green. His strokes were erratic, his posture too high, legs too stiff. He was burning oxygen faster than he could control at a rookie mistake, but one with dangerous consequences. Mason noticed too. Without hesitation, he stepped into the water, cutting through it like a man with no tolerance for failure on his watch. He didn't yell, he didn't scold. He simply appeared beside Rhodes, guiding him to the surface with a hand on his shoulder, grounding him with quiet authority. Harper, watching from her shadowed corner, made a mental note: that's a leader instinct first, ego second. But the moment of quiet observation was short-lived. 15 feet away, standing near the safety rope, Petty Officer Second Class, Noah Chen had her in his sights. He'd been monitoring the area per protocol alert, disciplined, sharp-eyed, and now he saw someone who didn't belong. A civilian woman, unfamiliar face, no ID badge, watching SEAL training like she owned the place. Chen's posture shifted immediately, hand to his radio, eyes never leaving her. He began moving in her direction, slow but deliberate, the same way you'd approach a potential IED nearby. Mason was climbing out of the pool, water streaming from his gear, his eyes instinctively tracking Chen's movement. Harper remained where she was, calm, composed, arms folded. She had expected this, hoped for it, even. There was value in watching how a team responded to unknown variables, value in being underestimated. Still, Chen's challenge was sharp and immediate. "Ma'am, this is a restricted area. I'm going to have to ask who you are and why you're here." His voice was respectful but firm, no room for negotiation. Other heads began to turn, One by one, members of Team Echo slowed their drills, their attention drawn to the confrontation unfolding at the equipment shed. Harper didn't answer right away. Instead, she glanced toward Mason, who was now walking briskly in her direction, water still dripping from his uniform. His expression was unreadable, but his posture screamed control, command presence field-tested, and completely unaware that the woman he was closing in on would be signing off on his performance evaluations by the end of the day. Mason stepped beside Chen, placing a steady hand on the younger man's shoulder as if to say, "I've got this." "Ma'am," he said, voice level, "you need to tell me who you are. This is a secure zone. Civilian access is prohibited." Harper tilted her head slightly, as if amused. The air between them tightened. "I'm observing," she said simply. "That's not an answer," Mason replied, taking a step forward. The others were watching now, Rhodes included, standing soaked and still catching his breath at the edge of the pool. The silence grew thick, anticipation crackling like static before a lightning strike. Chen shifted uneasily. Harper could feel Mason sizing her up, noting the calm in her eyes, the way she stood, the faint hint of amusement on her lips. She didn't flinch, didn't back away. That alone raised alarm bells in his mind. No civilian stands their ground like that in front of two armed SEALs. "You've got 10 seconds, Mason warned, "or I'm escorting you off the premises." Harper glanced at her watch. Plenty of time before the change of command ceremony. But curiosity was winning out over protocol. How far will he go? How does this team react when authority is uncertain, when identity is blurred? She said nothing. And in that moment, Jack Mason made a decision the wrong one, though he couldn't know that yet. He stepped forward and drenched her. Without waiting for confirmation, Mason triggered the emergency pool rinse system mounted above the nearby shed, a high-pressure blast meant to discourage unauthorized loitering near sensitive training areas. The water hit her square on a thunderous cascade that knocked her flannel shirt tight to her frame, soaked her jeans, and plastered her hair to her scalp. The rookies gasped. Chen froze. And Harper? She didn't move, didn't blink. She slowly brushed the water from her face and looked at Mason with the kind of measured calm that would have chilled a lesser man. That's when the footsteps sounded behind them, polished boots on pavement. A voice followed, crisp and commanding. "Chief Mason, stand down." Lieutenant Commander Ryan Whitaker had arrived, the current executive officer of Team Echo, and the only man on site who knew exactly who she was. The look on Mason's face as Harper reached into her jacket still dripping and pulled out her Navy ID. That was the true turning point. But the fallout was only beginning. The silence that followed Lieutenant Commander Ryan Whitaker's voice was absolute. The kind that only exists on military grounds when something has gone terribly, undeniably wrong. Chief Jack Mason turned sharply toward the source, his expression shifting from command to confusion. Whitaker wasn't scheduled to be here for another 20 minutes. His early arrival changed everything, and the sharpness in his tone sent a chill up Mason's spine. "Sir," Mason responded instinctively, snapping to attention. "We have a possible breach." "You don't—" Whitaker cut him off, his gaze now locked not on Mason, but on the soaking wet woman standing between him and the equipment shed. Her posture hadn't changed, calm, upright, composed, soaked to the bone but unaffected. Whitaker's voice lowered, now filled with something colder than reprimand awareness. "Chief Mason, Petty Officer Chen, I'd like to introduce you to Captain Harper Dalton, effective as of 0900 today. She is your new commanding officer." The words detonated like a controlled explosion. Mason didn't move, not even to breathe. Harper reached into her soaked flannel, revealing a small, dark leather credential case. She flipped it open with quiet finality, revealing her Navy ID and the unmistakable glint of gold captain's bars. Chen's jaw dropped. He took a single step back as if physically repelled by what he was seeing. Mason, on the other hand, remained frozen, his mind desperately trying to reconcile what had just happened with the cold, hard weight of reality. The woman he had just hosed down the one he had challenged, interrogated, and dismissed wasn't a civilian. She was the highest-ranking officer on the grounds. And now, every pair of eyes around the pool was on him. Rhodes let out a barely audible "holy shit" that earned a glare from Chen. A few other SEALs exchanged looks of disbelief, but no one dared speak. Whitaker broke the silence. "Captain Dalton, I believe you've had a memorable first impression." Harper smiled faintly, not sarcastic, not smug, just enough to confirm she'd been in full control the entire time. "Let's call it an unorthodox security assessment," she replied. "Some responses were enlightening." Whitaker exhaled slowly, part relief, part resignation. "Understood. Ma'am, shall I gather the team for formal introductions?" Harper nodded, then turned to Mason. "Chief." Her voice was calm, but it made Mason flinch slightly. "I'd like a word, alone." Mason didn't argue, didn't speak. He simply followed as Harper walked toward the command annex building, boots squelching in wet gravel, her damp shirt clinging to her back like a silent badge of irony. The team remained frozen until the door closed behind them. Inside, Harper peeled off the soaked flannel and tossed it over the back of a chair. Mason stood ramrod straight near the door, unsure if he was about to be court-martialed or publicly dressed down. She turned to face him. Her tone, still controlled, held weight. "You understand what just happened out there, Chief?" "Yes, ma'am," Mason replied, voice tight. "I failed to properly verify identity and acted on assumption." "No," she said, stepping closer. "You acted on instinct. Your team's safety was your priority. That's the kind of leader I need." Mason blinked, caught off guard. "But," Harper added, voice sharpening just slightly, "you also made a critical error in judgment. You treated someone you didn't recognize as a threat without exploring other options. You didn't question the scenario. You reacted fast, but not smart." Mason swallowed hard. "I take full responsibility, ma'am." She studied him for a long moment. Then, finally, she nodded. "Good. Because I'm not here to tear anyone down. I'm here to build something better. And if your actions today are any indication, you'll be a major part of that if you learn from it." "Yes, ma'am." Harper walked over to a small table, picked up a towel, and began drying her face. "Tell me, Chief, what was your honest impression of me before Whitaker showed up?" He hesitated. "Ma'am, you were composed, confident, didn't fit the profile of a civilian. That's why I stepped in." "You didn't trust your gut fully, though," she said, meeting his eyes. "You tried to force the situation into a mold it didn't fit. That's a dangerous habit in the field." Mason's jaw tightened, the sting of truth far worse than any formal reprimand. Harper finally offered a faint smirk. "Also, next time, don't use the rinse system. That was just rude." Mason's eyes widened slightly in horror, but then she laughed, quiet, short, but unmistakably genuine. "You'll live, Chief, and so will your career, but I suggest you get ahead of the story before it becomes legend in the barracks." "Yes, ma'am," Mason replied, a hint of relief softening his stance. Outside the annex, the rest of SEAL Team Echo was buzzing whispers, theories, retellings. Chen looked like he wanted to crawl into a locker. Rhodes, still towel drying his hair, shook his head in disbelief. "Only in this damn unit," he muttered to himself. The door opened. Harper and Mason stepped out. Mason's shoulders were still squared, but something in his posture had changed, not shame, not fear, something closer to humility. Harper scanned the team, her presence now fully acknowledged, authority no longer in question. "Gather up," she called out. "We've got a change of command to formalize, and I expect every one of you to show up dry, squared away, and 30 seconds early." The crowd snapped to attention. As they moved toward formation, Mason lingered behind for a moment, watching Harper stride forward, still damp, still unshaken, and very much in charge. He muttered under his breath, just loud enough for Chen to hear. "Well, I definitely made an impression." The formal change of command ceremony was scheduled for 0930 hours, but the real transition had already begun. Captain Harper Dalton stood at the front of the training grounds, the breeze still catching the ends of her now dried hair, while the men of SEAL Team Echo stood in tight formation before her. The same eyes that had watched her silently from behind mirrored sunglasses an hour earlier were now locked on her with a strange cocktail of curiosity, respect, and, in some cases, lingering disbelief. Lieutenant Commander Whitaker stepped forward, giving his final address as the outgoing executive officer. His words were crisp, respectful, and filled with the pride of a man handing over the reins to someone he clearly trusted. But beneath the surface of ceremony and salutes, the air crackled with unspoken thoughts, especially from Chief Jack Mason. Mason's perspective had shifted violently. Just hours ago, he'd seen her as a potential threat, someone to remove from the perimeter. Now, she stood as the top of the chain of command, a seasoned officer with a steely presence that both unnerved and intrigued him. He hadn't just misjudged her. He'd underestimated her. And that stung more than any reprimand ever could. As Whitaker finished his remarks and passed the symbolic flag to Harper, the team clapped politely. The applause wasn't thunderous, but it was respectful, a quiet recognition of a changing tide. Harper stepped forward, her voice steady as she addressed the group for the first time in full command. "I've read your files. I know your deployments, your specialties, your commendations, but I also know that paper doesn't tell the whole story. That's why I came here early this morning to see for myself what kind of warriors I'll be leading." She paused, letting the words settle. "I saw strength, I saw discipline, I saw leadership, and yes, I saw some room for growth." Several of the men shifted slightly. A few glanced at Mason, whose face remained impassive. "I don't lead from behind a desk," Harper continued. "I lead from beside you on the ground, in the dirt, and in the cold. I've been where you've been. I've made mistakes, and I've learned from them. I expect the same from each of you." Her gaze swept across the group, pausing briefly on Rhodes, then Chen, and finally, Mason. "That's all. Dismissed." The formation broke, and the men began dispersing, murmurs low and contained. No one was quite sure what to say. The woman who had walked in unnoticed was now the undisputed center of gravity. Later that afternoon, Mason found himself alone in the team's tactical prep room, reviewing gear requisitions and unit schedules. His thoughts weren't on paperwork, though they were back at the pool, back at the moment he triggered the rinse valve, back at the calm way Harper had handled the fallout. He had expected a commanding officer who would demand respect through rigidity. Instead, he got someone who had earned it through restraint. The door creaked open behind him. "Chief." He didn't need to turn to recognize the voice. "Ma'am," he replied, standing instinctively. "At ease," she said. Stepping into the room, she held a training schedule in one hand and a sealed personnel file in the other. "I've been reviewing your history with the team. 8 years, multiple deployments, commendations for leadership under fire. You've earned your reputation." Mason nodded slowly. "I've tried to lead by example." "You succeeded this morning in part," she said, her tone neutral. "You acted swiftly, you protected your team, but you also taught me something valuable." He raised an eyebrow. "You showed me the pulse of this unit. You showed me how much you care about protocol, security, and your people. That tells me more than any service record ever could." Mason looked down, unsure of how to respond. "I didn't come here to make enemies," Harper said after a beat, "and I didn't come to shake things up just to make a point. I came because this team matters and I believe we can be even better than we already are." Mason finally met her gaze. "With all due respect, ma'am, I was wrong about you." Harper gave a small smile. "That's good, because I was counting on it." He let out a breath, half chuckle, half apology. The rinse system, that was overkill. Harper smirked. "It's already being called the baptism by your rookies, so yes, probably overkill." They both laughed quietly, the tension between them finally breaking. "But," she added, "I've seen enough to know this team needs you. They trust you, and I need someone like that at my side." Mason stood straighter. "Then you've got me, Captain, all in." Harper nodded. "Good. We start joint drills with Recon Team Bravo next week. I want your assessment on our current training gaps before then." "Yes, ma'am." As she turned to leave, she paused at the door. "Oh, and Chief." "Yes, ma'am. I'll be expecting payback. You owe me a dry uniform and a cup of hot coffee." He grinned for the first time that day. "I'll bring two." By the end of the week, SEAL Team Echo was already operating with a different energy. It wasn't louder or faster, just sharper, cleaner, as if every operator had felt the subtle shift that came with Captain Harper Dalton's arrival and adjusted their internal compass accordingly. It wasn't fear. It was expectation. Harper didn't bark orders. She didn't loom over shoulders. What she did was watch, listen, and when she spoke, it was with the precision of someone who only fired when she had a target worth hitting. One morning, just before sunrise, the team gathered in the operations room, a darkened space lined with monitors, tactical maps, and encrypted comm stations. Mason stood near the center, arms crossed, while Rhodes, Chen, and the rest of the team waited for the brief. Harper entered with a tablet in hand. The room instinctively quieted. "We've received a forward request from Recon Team Bravo," she began, her voice steady but energized. "They're running joint training ops in Alaska, Arctic insertion, night navigation, live fire simulation, and coordinated exfil under low visibility." She paused. "And they've requested us, specifically." Heads turned, a few eyebrows rose. "No other team has successfully completed this exercise under real-time cold weather conditions in the last 6 months," Harper continued. "Command wants a breakthrough. I want a benchmark. So we're taking this." Mason exchanged a glance with Chen. The unspoken message was clear. This is no cakewalk. "First phase begins in 4 days, Harper said. "I want every operator operating as if we're already deployed. That means Arctic conditioning, gear adaptation drills, NVG refreshers, and double rotation on tactical planning." She tapped the screen, pulling up a terrain map of the extraction zone. White terrain, no cover, brutal wind. Chief Mason will be point on tactics and navigation. Petty Officer Chen will oversee gear readiness. Rhodes, she paused, letting the rookie straighten in his seat. "You'll shadow me directly? Time to see what you've got when the pressure gets real." The room hummed with focus. No one questioned the assignment. No one second-guessed the orders. If there were doubts, they were buried under the weight of responsibility and adrenaline. After the briefing, Harper lingered behind as the team filtered out. Mason stayed too, arms still crossed, eyes on the map. "Recon Bravo doesn't usually ask for help," he muttered. "No," Harper agreed, "which is exactly why we say yes." He looked at her, then back at the terrain. "They'll be watching us, especially you." Harper's voice was firm. "Let them." Mason hesitated, then asked something he hadn't dared before. "Why Echo? You had your pick. You could have taken command of any unit in the fleet. Why us?" Harper considered that, then walked to the window, where the soft pink light of morning was just beginning to break over the compound. "Because you're not broken," she said, "but you've been stagnant, too used to the same rhythms, same voices. You needed a challenge, and so did I." She turned to face him. "Don't get me wrong, I didn't come here to make friends, but I came here to make warriors sharper, meaner, smarter. This team has the bones of something excellent. I want to be the one who brings it out." Mason exhaled. "Well, you're doing that, in your own way." She smirked, still holding a grudge over the rinse. "No, ma'am, that legend's already out of my hands." That afternoon, Harper walked the training grounds, stopping at each station observing underwater recovery practice, endurance conditioning, and weapons recalibration. Rhodes was in full training gear, mid-sprint across the obstacle course, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. He stumbled once but caught himself. Harper made a note. Later, in the gear bay, Chen approached her with the requisition list. "Thermals and Arctic boots are short 2 units. Logistics says next shipment arrives day after we deploy." "Borrow from SEAL Team Foxtrot," Harper replied without missing a beat. "Their field op was canceled. I'll make the call myself." Chen blinked. "You know their schedule." "I know all the team's schedules," she said plainly. "Never walk into a fight blind." He nodded slowly, a newfound layer of respect settling in. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the team settled into their post-training routines, Harper sat in her modest office, a desk still half filled with Whitaker's old files and half filled with her own methodical notes. A knock sounded at the door. It was Rhodes. Captain Dalton. Yes, petty officer. I just wanted to say thank you for the chance, for not giving up on me after the pool thing. Harper looked up from her notes. You messed up, you struggled, but you didn't quit. That's what I noticed. Not your failure, your fight. Rhodes straightened, pride swelling behind tired eyes. I won't let you down, ma'am. I know you won't, she replied. Now go hydrate. Tomorrow, we start live load drills at 500. As he exited, Harper leaned back in her chair. This team was beginning to feel different, not just in routine, but in spirit. Discipline was there. Trust was building. She knew the Arctic Op would test everything they'd just begun to develop. But that was the point. Growth never came from comfort. And if Team Echo was going to become the unit she believed it could be, then this mission wouldn't just be an opportunity. It would be a proving ground. The C-130 shuddered as it sliced through the turbulent skies above Alaska. Inside, the cargo bay hummed with tension, not fear, but readiness. SEAL Team Echo sat in silence, their breath visible in the freezing air despite the layers of gear. Arctic ops were never about firepower. They were about endurance, coordination, and the ability to think clearly when everything around you was trying to kill you. Captain Harper Dalton adjusted her headset and studied the terrain map lit dimly by the console screen. Beside her, Chief Jack Mason sat double-checking their primary extraction route with a red grease pencil on laminated paper. It wasn't necessary, he'd memorized it 3 days ago. But repetition was his ritual. Rhodes sat across from them, checking his weapon for the 5th time in 10 minutes. Relax. Rhodes, Mason said without looking up. You'll need that energy when we hit the ground. I am relaxed, Rhodes lied, gripping his rifle tighter. Harper hid a faint smile. The rookie had improved, noticeably. His posture, his breathing, even the way he received correction all sharper, more grounded. There was still fear behind his eyes, but it had evolved, from panic into focus. The green light above the jump ramp flickered. 30 seconds, the jump master called. Harper stood, pulling her balaclava over her face and slapping Mason's shoulder. You ready, Chief? Always. They jumped in pairs, disappearing into the howling dark over a sheet of white wilderness. The mission wasn't real, not by Intel standards, but it was the closest thing to combat without gunfire. The objective: retrieve a high-value target dummy from a simulated enemy compound and exfil under blackout conditions. Each operator carried 70 LEBs of gear, battled 30-degree temperatures, and moved under complete radio silence except for hand signals. It was the kind of scenario that revealed everything. Rhodes struggled on the second day. Midway through a 6-mile snowshoe traverse, his legs gave out once then again. The wind bit through his mask, turning his exhale into white steam clouds. Mason dropped beside him without a word, adjusted Rhodes' pack, and redistributed 20 LEBs onto his own shoulders. Rhodes looked up, breathless. You didn't have to. I'm not doing it for you, Mason growled. I'm doing it for the mission. You fall behind. We all fail. So keep moving. Rhodes did. Harper watched it all from the ridge above. She didn't intervene. She didn't need to. The growth was happening organically, forged by fire and frost. That night, the team camped inside a makeshift snow shelter. No tents, just layered tarps, body heat, and the occasional mumbled joke in the darkness to keep spirits from freezing alongside fingers. Mason sat beside Harper, running diagnostics on his comms equipment. You've changed them, he said after a while. Harper looked over. How so? They're faster, quieter, tighter. The new guys follow, the old guys lead smarter. She nodded. And you? He shrugged. I got soaked by a captain pretending to be a trespasser. If that's not humbling enough to grow, nothing is. She smiled, then said seriously, You've been essential. Jack, I needed buy-in from someone who lived their respect, not demanded it. Mason looked down. You had it. The second you didn't throw me under the bus in front of the team. Their quiet moment was broken by Rhodes stumbling into their shelter space, still shivering slightly, but upright. Ma'am, Chief, I logged today's nav points in the recon log, and the thermal scopes acting up thought you should know. Harper nodded. Good catch. Go grab Chow. As he turned to leave, Mason called after him. Rhodes. Yes, Chief. You led point today for 4 miles in a whiteout. That was solid work. Rhodes blinked. Thank you, sir. Don't let it go to your head. I won't, he grinned. I'm too cold for that. After he disappeared, Harper leaned back against the icy wall of the shelter. 6 weeks ago, he was hyperventilating in a pool, she said quietly. And now he's asking about thermal optics, Mason replied. Yeah, growth. The final night of the operation came fast. Their extraction involved a 1 snowmobile convoy under low-light conditions, fast, rough, and unforgiving. Harper led the pack, Mason close behind, Rhodes bringing up the rear with Chen navigating. They hit a blizzard wall midway through visibility near zero. For a moment, Harper lost the rear units behind a snowdrift. Status, she called into her comm. Nothing but static. Then Rhodes's voice broke through, shaky but clear. Team intact. Adjusted course 5 degrees east to avoid wind tunnel, following your lead. Harper exhaled. He had corrected his position, independently, accurately. When they reached the exfil helicopter, the team was silent, exhausted, frost-numbed, but intact. Inside the roaring Black Hawk, Harper looked at Mason across the rows of strapped-down packs and frost-covered goggles. No casualties, 0 missed checkpoints, all targets acquired. Mason nodded, and no one cried. Speak for yourself, Harper muttered, cracking a smile. Rhodes sat beside Chen, steam rising from their gear as the cabin warmed. He looked around the chopper at the men, at Harper, at the patch on his own arm. For the first time, he felt like he wasn't just wearing the trident. He was earning it. 3 weeks had passed since SEAL Team Echo returned from the Arctic exercise. The snow had melted from their boots, but the frost of that mission had left its imprint not in injuries or failures, but in something far deeper. In the way they moved together, spoke less, trusted more. It was subtle, but undeniable. They were now a team reborn. Captain Harper Dalton stood in the observation tower overlooking the dry training field at Naval Outpost Arrowhead. Below her, Rhodes and Chen were leading a squad of junior operators through a mock urban extraction. Their signals were clean, timing crisp, no unnecessary chatter. She sipped black coffee from a steel thermos, arms crossed, watching the kind of cohesion that couldn't be forced, only earned. A knock came at the steel door behind her. Enter. Chief Jack Mason stepped in, already halfway through his daily debrief folder. Simulation wrapped, 2 missed objectives, 1 radio glitch. Rhodes flagged it before it became an issue. Harper raised an eyebrow. He caught it mid-run. Before insertion, a smile touched her lips. He's ahead of where I expected him. He's not the only one, Mason added, stepping beside her at the window. They stood in silence for a moment, the kind only 2 field veterans could share, no need to fill space with noise, just presence, shared weight, shared pride. You know what surprises me most, Mason finally asked? That you haven't tried to get even for the rinse incident, Harper offered with a smirk. He let out a low chuckle. That too, but no. What surprises me is how fast they adjusted. The team, you. Harper turned toward him. I didn't give them the option not to. That's not entirely true, Mason replied. You gave them something better, a reason to follow. She considered that for a moment, then looked back out over the field. When I took this post, I knew I was walking into a unit with legacy, reputation, layers I wasn't a part of. It's easy to step in and command, but leading, that's different. You did both, Mason said, but yeah, you led first. Harper remembered that first morning, the suspicious eyes, the soaking, the pause before revealing who she really was. That moment could have broken her relationship with the team before it even started. But instead, it defined her. Leadership, she knew, wasn't earned by rank or seniority. It was earned by moments. And she had chosen hers wisely. Later that day, the team gathered for their monthly readiness briefing, but this one was different. The mood in the room was lighter, more cohesive, less like a briefing, more like a brotherhood check-in. Harper stood at the front, the unit crest projected on the screen behind her. 3 months ago, she began, I walked onto this base and none of you knew who I was. Some of you thought I was a civilian. One of you, she looked directly at Mason, treated me like a threat, and introduced me to your emergency rinse system. The room broke into low, knowing laughter. Even Mason couldn't help but grin. I didn't reveal my identity that morning because I wanted to see who you really were, how you reacted, what instincts kicked in when you didn't have all the facts. Her tone grew more serious, and what I saw was good, not perfect, not polished, but honest. You cared more about security than comfort, more about the team than courtesy. That told me everything I needed to know. She paused, then continued. I've served under leaders who commanded respect out of fear, and I've served under those who inspired it through presence, consistency, and care. I know which one lasts longer. Harper glanced at Rhodes. You've grown faster than any new operator I've seen in years, and not just because of what happened in Alaska, but because you listened. You failed forward. Rhodes straightened in his chair, caught somewhere between pride and disbelief. She turned to Chen. You've got instincts worth gold. You spotted me from 50 feet out before anyone else even blinked. I'll be relying on that in the field. And finally, her gaze found Mason. And Chief Mason, if I had to pick someone to stand between me and chaos, I'd pick you, even if you're holding a fire hose. Laughter again, but this time, it wasn't nervous. It was earned. Respect, real, unfiltered, and mutual. Whatever comes next, Harper said, her voice dropping into something steadier, stronger. Whether it's desert, jungle, or ice again, we go as one. That's how we win. Not by muscle, not by orders, but by knowing the man beside you would carry your gear without being asked, would speak truth when it's uncomfortable, would follow because they've seen you lead. She looked around the room one last time, and for the first time, no one saw her as an outsider. She was Echo now, and Echo was ready. Leadership isn't about walking into a room and demanding obedience. It's about earning trust when no one's watching. Captain Harper Dalton didn't take command with a speech or a salute. She did it with presence, with patience, and with the strength to let people misjudge her, knowing that respect earned slowly is stronger than loyalty forced quickly. Because at its core, leadership is service. And the greatest leaders are the ones willing to be underestimated just long enough to prove everyone wrong. If this story moved you, hit subscribe and tap the bell. More true strength and leadership stories are on the way. Share it with someone who needs a reminder. Leadership isn't loud, it's earned. Thanks for watching. See you in the next story.